President Donald Trump held high-stakes talks with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Beijing, where the two agreed that the Strait of Hormuz must remain open and reaffirmed that Iran must never obtain nuclear weapons. A senior South Korean government official said Thursday that it appears unlikely that a non-Iranian actor was behind last week's attack on a South Korean-operated vessel in the Strait of Hormuz, while emphasizing that the investigation remains ongoing. Korea's ICT exports posted their sharpest ever growth last month, fueled by soaring semiconductor shipments amid the ongoing AI boom. We begin in Beijing, where U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have kicked off a two-day summit amid tensions over trade and Taiwan. The two leaders wrapped up the opening day of talks with a shared message that the Strait of Hormuz must remain open and that Iran can never possess nuclear weapons. Our Moon Hae-ryun starts us off.
The United States and China have agreed that the Strait of Hormuz must remain open to allow the free flow of energy transportation, the White House said Thursday, after U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping wrapped up their first round of talks in Beijing that officials described as good. The agreement on the critical oil thoroughfare was among the most concrete outcomes of the summit. Washington says Xi had also expressed opposition to any militarization of the strait or attempts to charge a toll for its use, and signaled interest in purchasing more American oil to reduce China's dependence on the Middle East. Iran, which relies heavily on Chinese demand for its oil exports, had been a central item on Trump's agenda, though it remains unclear whether Xi agreed to take a more active role in bringing the conflict to an end. The two sides also reportedly discussed fentanyl, market access for U.S. companies in China, Trump's push to increase Chinese investment in the United States, and its purchase of American farm products. The talks were also shadowed by a blunt warning from Xi on Taiwan. Speaking at the Great Hall of the People on Thursday morning, the Chinese leader called it the most critical issue in the bilateral relationship, cautioning that if mishandled, the two countries could collide or even clash, putting relations in an extremely dangerous place. Xi otherwise struck a conciliatory tone, invoking the Thucydides trap, the idea that a rising and an incumbent power are historically prone to conflict, and urging both sides to forge a new path together. Trump had arrived in Beijing earlier to a formal welcome, with Xi greeting him personally outside the Great Hall before the two walked past an honor guard.
A stable China-U.S. relationship benefits the entire world. When we cooperate, both sides benefit. When we confront each other, both sides suffer.
But it's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be your friend. And the relationship between China and the USA is going to be better than ever before. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Their closed-door session lasted roughly 2 hours, twice the originally scheduled length, and Trump, speaking to reporters afterwards, described it simply as great. The two leaders then toured the nearby Temple of Heaven together. Beijing said the two sides also exchanged views on the Ukraine crisis and the situation on the Korean Peninsula, without disclosing details. Trump is due for a second day of talks scheduled for Friday. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
South Korea believes that there is a little possibility of a non-Iranian actor being behind the attack on the HMM Namu in the Strait of Hormuz on May 4th. And Foreign Minister Cho Hyun later added that attacks on Korea's civilian vessels can never be justified. Cha Yoon-kyung reports.
The government believes that Iran was behind the attack on a South Korean-operated vessel, the HMM Namu, in the Strait of Hormuz on May 4th. A senior official said Thursday that the government is gathering evidence related to the strike on the cargo vessel. He noted that the possibility of another actor besides Iran cannot be ruled out. However, common sense suggests this is unlikely since there were no pirates nearby. The official cautioned that Seoul has not yet formally confirmed the result yet, emphasizing that any conclusion regarding Iranian involvement would depend on the outcome of an ongoing probe assisted by the U.S. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun said Thursday that attacks on civilian vessels, including the HMM Namu, can never be justified or tolerated under any circumstances. Cho added that an additional government-level investigation into the attack on the HMM Namu will be conducted. He said necessary response measures will be taken accordingly, continuing that the government will make an effort to cooperate with related countries amid heightened geopolitical uncertainties. The Ministry of National Defense announced Thursday that it had sent a technical analysis team to Dubai to determine the cause and conduct a scientific analysis of the attack on the HMM Namu. The ministry said it will support the activities of the government joint response team by conducting a thorough on-site investigation, analyzing evidence to confirm the exact facts. The ministry added that the number of personnel dispatched and details of their activities would not be disclosed to ensure smooth investigative activities. 차윤경, Arirang News.
As South Korea nears its one-year mark of the Lee Jae-myung administration, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun highlighted some of the government's key achievements and priorities. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Seung has the details.
Seoul is expanding its diplomatic outreach to a broader range of strategic partners, working to stabilize the global order and economy amid a time of conflict and uncertainty. Speaking to reporters Thursday, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun reflected on the Lee Jae-myung administration's first year of pragmatic diplomacy. He said President Lee has moved quickly on the multilateral stage, attending the Group of Seven meeting, the United Nations General Assembly, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and G20 summits, on top of hosting last year's Asia-Pacific Economic Forum in Gyeongju. Cho then turned to Seoul's major bilateral relationships, beginning with the alliance with the United States. Cho said Presidents Lee and Donald Trump had completed reciprocal visits in record time and produced a joint fact sheet last year, which covers their tariff agreement and cooperation in strategic security sectors. Cho said the bilateral understanding has opened a path towards introducing nuclear-powered submarines and securing enrichment and reprocessing capabilities for peaceful purposes. On relations with China, Cho said Seoul-Beijing ties have been fully restored through reciprocal state visits, including the Chinese president's first state visit to Korea in 11 years. He also cited recent talks on supply chain cooperation, covering key minerals, rare earths and urea. With Japan, the minister said Seoul and Tokyo swiftly revived top-level reciprocal visits, or the so-called shuttle diplomacy, and deepened future-oriented cooperation in areas including artificial intelligence, advanced technologies and supply chains. He also noted their first-ever 2+2 meeting of foreign and defence vice ministers. Going forward, Cho said Seoul is now expanding the strategic horizons of its diplomacy by strengthening ties with the Global South, Europe, the Indo-Pacific and ASEAN. He pointed to next month's Korea-Africa Foreign Ministers meeting in Seoul, involving 54 African countries and 4 international organizations. The first Korea Central Asia Summit is also set for September in Seoul. Cho cited the growing importance of Central Asia amid energy and supply chain pressures from the Middle East crisis. On that note, the minister said Seoul would continue working with major countries to uphold freedom of navigation and protect Korean crew members and vessels. Looking ahead, Minister Cho said that Korea will contribute to reducing global economic imbalances and reforming international partnerships while upholding universal values including peace, international norms and human rights. Oh Seung, Arirang News.
The combat-ready KF-21, South Korea's homegrown fighter jet, has entered a mass production in Sacheon city and is set for deployment with the Republic of Korea Air Force. Our defense correspondent Gyeongbokgung got a sneak peek of the production site.
The KF-21, a South Korean-made 4.5 generation supersonic fighter. At this site in Sacheon, Gyeongsangnam-do province, around 20 KF-21 fighter jets are currently being assembled. The KF-21 Borame was first envisioned by then-President Kim Dae-jung in 2001, who dreamed of developing an advanced, domestically built fighter jet. The program officially entered the development phase in December 2015 and then underwent 5 years of ground testing from 2021 until February this year. During the testing, the jet completed more than 1,600 test flights without a single accident and passed roughly 13,000 test conditions.
This homegrown KF-21 fighter jet is being prepared for its flight test. After more than 10 years in development, South Korea plans to deliver the first mass-produced aircraft to the Air Force in September.
The CEO of Korea Aerospace Industries underlined how despite initial doubts from the likes of Lockheed Martin, the country was able to make the development a success. Now he dreams of exporting hopefully up to 1,000 jets, with already around 200 potential export orders. As Korea becomes the 8th country to produce its own supersonic jet fighters, the KF-21 is also expected to greatly boost the K-defense industry as a whole.
The introduction of South Korea's independently developed KF-21 will go beyond replacing aging fighters like F-4 and F-5. It will open up a new era of self-reliant defense and be a starting point of a stronger military defense industry ecosystem.
With the Air Force Chief of Staff having promised to bring forward the F-5's retirement from 2030 to 2027, KF-21 is soon to become one of the Air Force's core assets. Gyeongbokgung, Arirang News, Sacheon.
Korea's economy is seeing a massive boost, driven largely by a historic boom in the technology sector. Not only have information and communication technology exports reached an all-time high, but this semiconductor supercycle is also helping to rapidly improve the government's fiscal health. Joining me in the studio to break down these numbers and the broader implications is our business and economy correspondent, Kim Do-yeon. Welcome, Do-yeon.
Good to be here.
So, Do-yeon, let's start with the export data. April was a milestone month for the tech sector. Tell us about the latest export data.
That's right. ICT exports logged its highest growth rate in history last month. Now, export volume reached $42.71 billion, which is a 125.9% surge compared to the same month last year. This marks the first time ICT exports have surpassed the $40 billion mark for 2 consecutive months. The semiconductor sector is doing the heavy lifting, skyrocketing 173.3% on year. The global tech industry is racing to build artificial intelligence infrastructure, creating a severe bottleneck for high-performance memory chips. Here is what one industry expert had to say about this momentum.
The reason the ICT exports are hitting all-time highs right now is the supply shortage in memory chip exports, which is driving prices incredibly high. Because of this, it's very likely we will break records again next month.
And we're already seeing this spill over into the computer and peripheral devices sector, which saw a staggering 430% export increase, heavily influenced by the AI-driven demand for solid-state drives.
It's interesting how this industrial boom is directly translating into a national treasury. Now, the government's first quarter fiscal data released today shows a rather narrow deficit. Tell us more about that.
Right. According to the Ministry of Economy and Finance, the managed fiscal balance, which indicates the government's actual fiscal state, posted a deficit of 39.6 trillion won in the first quarter. While still a deficit, this is an improvement of 21.7 trillion won compared to a year ago, making it the narrowest first quarter deficit in 6 years. This was driven by a massive increase in total revenue, which reached 188.8 trillion won. A closer look reveals that income tax revenue rose by 4.7 trillion won, fueled directly by increased performance bonuses for employees at semiconductor giants like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, along with other industries and government policies. But bonuses are important because a big portion of the bonuses are taxed. However, experts point out that relying so heavily in just one sector creates a dangerous optical illusion for the broader economy. Take a listen.
Because of companies in a small number of industries, it looks like our economy is doing well and recovering. But in some ways, this is a severe polarization. The industries that are struggling are simply continuing to struggle. So while we can't say it's strictly just semiconductors, it is true that this is limited to a few industries and a few companies.
Essentially, while the headline numbers and government coffers look phenomenal thanks to chips, other sectors of the domestic economy are still struggling, meaning the wealth is not trickling down evenly.
Now, Do-yeon, you mentioned the performances, bonuses at semiconductor companies boosting national tax revenues. But ironically, at the same time, those bonuses are currently the source of a dispute at Samsung Electronics. What is the latest on that conflict?
Right, the situation at Samsung Electronics is reaching a critical point as the gap between labor and management remains wide. The union is specifically demanding that the company institutionalizes a fixed performance bonus of 15% of its operating profit for the semiconductor division. They're also calling for the removal of the current cap on bonuses, which is currently set at 50% of an employee's annual salary. Management, however, is standing firm on maintaining its existing incentive system based on economic value added, though it has proposed additional special rewards for the semiconductor unit. Following the breakdown of negotiations early Wednesday, May 13th, the union has set a firm deadline. They are demanding a response by 10 a.m. tomorrow, May 15th. If these conditions are not met, the union plans to launch a general strike from May 21st to June 7th. The government has been closely watching the situation because, as we saw, it directly affects the nation's fiscal policy. Deputy Prime Minister for Economy and Finance Koo Yoon-chul warned today that a strike would pose a significant risk to the country's overall growth and exports, urging a swift, principled resolution.
Well, we'll have to see how the management and the union will how they will navigate this standoff. Toyan, thank you for the analysis.
Well, thank you for having me.
President Lee Jae-myung has called for the global expansion of Korea's Saemaul Undong. Now, the call came on this Thursday during his visit to the Korea Saemaul Undong Center, a nonprofit organization that oversees development projects both at home and abroad. Launched in 1970, the movement sought to modernize rural parts of the country. The government provided training and materials, while local residents took up labor to build infrastructure such as roads and bridges. The movement gained international recognition as a successful model for sustainable development, with its archives added to UNESCO's Memory of the World Register in 2013. On the political front, candidate registration has begun for the June 3rd local elections. Our An Sang-jin covers this process and the lineup thus far.
With less than 3 weeks left, local elections are entering a decisive phase here in Korea as candidates move from preliminary campaigning to officially registering to run for office. Contenders now formally join the race through the official registration process from May 14th and 15th, leaving around 20 days till the vote. Now let's take a closer look at some of the finalized candidate lineups for the 16 metropolitan mayoral and gubernatorial races. Starting with Seoul, one of the country's key battlegrounds, the capital has taken shape as a two-way contest between the DP's candidate Chung Won-ho and the incumbent Mayor Oh Se-hoon of the PPP. Now, if you look over here in the side in Gyeonggi-do province, Korea's most populous province with roughly 13 million residents, the gubernatorial race is set to make history with the DP's Choo Mi-ae and the PPP's Yang Yang-ja marking the first female head-to-head race for a metropolitan governor position. Now, a tendency we see in the candidate lineup for this election is that the main opposition PPP has named most of its incumbent figures. If we see over here, all four PPP candidates in the Gangwon-do and Chungcheong-do regions, which normally act as a casting vote area, are either current mayors or governors. Similarly, the traditional conservative Gyeongsang-do region, another major battleground, has 4 out of 5 of its candidates as current heads, as the PPP seeks to defend its regional base and strongholds through high-profile figures, and as the ruling party attempts to make inroads. With these candidates and their strong ambitions, how have the ruling and opposition parties been unveiling their competing election strategies? The ruling Democratic Party is framing its main goal around regional economic development by establishing mega special districts focused on advanced industries such as robotics and biotechnology, offering companies tax incentives. The DP is also promoting a series of welfare-focused pledges, including climate insurance programs, help centers for the elderly, and other community-oriented proposals. The main opposition People Power Party is centering its campaign on housing and solving cost of living issues, such as a housing program that would expand long-term rental contracts and transportation subsidies. It also unveiled policies targeting investment for scientific research and small businesses. Official campaigning will begin on May 21st, with candidates taking part in street rallies and televised debates. Early voting is scheduled for May 29th and 30th, while the main election will take place on June 3rd. As the campaign season is now fully underway, attention is turning to which party can deliver the most persuasive policies and messages in the upcoming local election battle. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
BTS is set to perform at the 2026 FIFA World Cup final halftime show alongside global pop stars Madonna and Shakira. According to FIFA, BTS will co-headline the first ever World Cup final halftime show set to take place at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey on July 19th. Curated by Coldplay frontman Chris Martin and advocacy organization Global Citizen, the halftime show aims to support the FIFA Global Citizen Education Fund and expanding access to education and sports opportunities for children around the world. And BTS said in a statement released by its agency Big Hit Music that it will be a great honor to stand on such a meaningful stage where the whole world comes together. As the spring nights settle over Seoul City, Gyeongbokgung Palace is once again opening its gates for its limited seasonal evening tours, offering visitors a rare glimpse into Korea's royal past beneath the tranquil night sky. Our culture correspondent Do Young-eun takes us there.
As the sun sets over the city, Gyeongbokgung Palace begins to glow beneath the spring night sky. Passing through Gwanghwamun Gate, the sounds of the city soften into a peaceful landscape where history, nature, and the beauty of Korea's royal architecture come together. Wearing colorful hanbok, visitors wander around the illuminated palace grounds, creating unforgettable memories beneath the gentle lights of the palace.
We were thinking about what to do for our 500th day anniversary. And then we heard that Gyeongbokgung Palace was opening at night, so we decided to come here together. There were so many hanbok rental shops nearby, and my girlfriend likes pink colors, so we chose matching outfits in this style.
My sister made the reservation, so I came here right after work. Since it's spring and the weather is so nice, seeing the lanterns and everything with my child is creating such a wonderful memory.
As the night falls, visitors can see landmarks like Kunjeongjeon Hall and the Gyeonghaeru Pavilion from a new perspective. Along the quiet palace path, the architecture and shimmering reflections across the water create a calm and breathtaking atmosphere. Further inside, visitors can also step into parts of the palace that are usually off limits, like Gyotaejeon Hall, once the Queen's living quarters, offering a rare glimpse into royal life during the Joseon dynasty. This is Kunjeongjeon Hall, the grandest and most iconic part of Gyeongbokgung Palace and its main attraction. Seeing the palace lit by beautiful night illuminations in the heart of Seoul, it feels like taking a journey back in time through the 500-year history of Joseon dynasty. The Gyeongbokgung Palace night opening invites visitors to the royal palace after dark through June 14. Only 3,300 guests each evening can step into this nighttime journey with an admission fee of 3,000 won, while children under 6, seniors age 65 and older, and visitors dressed in hanbok can enter free of charge.
It's a cool experience of taking pictures, just wandering around the palace because it's a really nice historical site of South Korea, and we're just having fun.
The nighttime opening will become even richer with performances of traditional court music beginning Friday, including a special performance commemorating the birth of King Sejong the Great. The Korea Heritage Service says it will continue developing programs to help the public better appreciate the historical value and the beauty of the nation's royal palaces. Do Young-eun, Arirang News.
The unseasonable heat will continue tomorrow, but with large day-to-night temperature swings of around 15 degrees Celsius, it's a good idea to keep a light jacket handy. This unusually warm weather is expected to last into early next week. Especially in the western regions, daytime highs will reach near 30 degrees Celsius. Still, the air remains fairly dry so that it won't feel as muggy as typical summer weather. Skies will be mostly clear across the country tomorrow with UV levels levels reaching very high levels. And with strong sunshine heating things up, ozone concentrations are expected to rise in the afternoon, especially across the capital area and Chungcheongdo provinces. As for temperatures, Seoul will start the day at 17 degrees, Chuncheon at 13 degrees, Gwangju at 15 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 31 degrees, Daejeon at 30 degrees, Busan at 23 degrees. Looking ahead, highs above 30 degrees will continue for now. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
Let's go, Simply K-pop! Hello everybody, I am Simply K-pop's MC Alan of Gravity.
네, 여러분 안녕하세요. Simply K-pop MC 그래비티 원진입니다. Then this week's Simply K-pop, don't miss out.
Knock, knock. The magical door to the world of K-animation is swinging wide open. Meet your instant new BFF, the adorable Catch. Tina Ping will have you hooked from the very first glance. Need a hand? Our Robocar Poli Rescue team is always zooming in to save the day. How about tagging along on Pinkfong and Pal's super exciting quest to reclaim their lost magic? With the mysterious life forms Cabion by your side, you can become a Cabion master and save humanity like the total hero. Protecting children's innocence while igniting their boundless imaginations. That's the magic of Korean animation. K-animation, the ultimate bestie for kids worldwide.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. The world's two biggest powers are once again sitting face-to-face in Beijing. U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping held high-stakes summit talks earlier today, emphasizing stability and cooperation despite deep divisions over trade, technology, and security. The White House says the two leaders also reached common ground on keeping the Strait of Hormuz open and preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons, signaling possible coordination on one of today's most urgent global flashpoints. From AI chips and economic ties to Taiwan and the broader global order, the latest meetings are being closely watched for signs of whether Washington and Beijing can expand cooperation even while managing strategic competition. To break it all down, we connect to Mu-Hui Zhang, Associate Professor of East Asian Studies at Sungkyunkwan University. A very big welcome.
Thank you for having me here.
And also joining us is Hannah Kim, Associate Professor at Seoul University's GSIS. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me as well.
So let's start a discussion with Professor Zhang, with President Trump and Xi's summit, of course. They now may have wrapped up their first day of their summit in Beijing. So based on what we've seen so far, what stood out to you the most?
Well, I think it sounds to me that so far so good. Well, I have to say, from my country's perspective, from Chinese perspective, we are trying to portray or describe this time Trump's visit to China as the state visit plus. That is to say the China side has been trying to provide, the highest level of diplomatic courtesy to the U.S. side. As you can see, there has been the visits to what we call the Temple of Heaven in the afternoon session as well. But I would say that if you look at the schedules or agendas of this meeting, obviously it covers 4 areas, including, economic cooperation, and also the trade issue, and the Iran issue, and also possibly the Taiwan issue as well. Although the atmosphere seems to be positive as a total, but I would say personally I'm more like cautiously positive on what is going on. The reason is that first of all, we haven't seen the real written agreement or joint declaration published by the two countries' side, and also we have to remind that. Exactly 9 years ago, when the President Trump visited Beijing for the first time, everything also seems to be good at the very beginning. But however, in the November of 2017, just a couple of months after President Trump paid the visit to China, and he declared the start of the trade war with China. So we have to be anyway cautious and wait to see what will happen in the coming days. Thank you.
So cautious optimism, you're saying. Now, if we rewind a little bit to a couple of days ago, even before the summit began, senior U.S. and Chinese officials held pre-summit economic consultations here in Seoul, while President Lee Jae-myung separately met both delegations. Professor Kim, what does that say about South Korea's growing diplomatic role amid intensifying, competition between the two powers?
I think it does seem significant to a certain extent. The fact that senior US and Chinese officials chose Seoul as the main venue for pre-summit economic consultations, and that President Lee Jae-myung separately met both delegations suggests several important shifts in South Korea's diplomatic position. And this is amid intensifying US-China rivalry. And so first, it indicates that South Korea is increasingly being viewed not merely as a US ally, but also as a strategically consequential middle power that is capable of maintaining communication channels with both Washington and Beijing simultaneously. And so South Korea is not just caught between superpowers anymore, but is functioning as a middle power convener. And the decision by US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng is also, and the fact that they held last-minute consultations in Seoul before the Trump-Xi summit was diplomatically symbolic. But in addition to this, it reflects Seoul's growing value as an intermediary space in the Indo-Pacific. In the current environment, direct US-China engagement is politically sensitive and highly securitized, and holding consultations in a third country that maintains close economic ties with China, but also remaining a formal US treaty ally can create a politically manageable setting. So South Korea kind of occupies a rare position where both powers are still considered engaging worthwhile in that sense. And that itself demonstrates a degree of diplomatic trust and relevance. But also, Lee Jae-myung appears to be pursuing a flexible and pragmatic diplomatic posture as the South Korean president. And so recent diplomacy under the Lee administration has emphasized restoring or stabilizing relations with China while simultaneously preserving the alliance with the United States. And so this fits a broader pattern where South Korea is attempting to avoid being reduced to a passive frontline state in great power competition and instead positioning itself as an active diplomatic actor.
And we will be looking forward to more of these kinds of roles from Korea moving forward. But when we go back to the summit between President Trump and President Xi, the broader message coming out of today's summit was President Xi, he proposed building what he called a constructive and strategically stable relationship between the two countries. Professor Zhang, how significant is that language, and what do you think Beijing is really trying to achieve with this?
Well, I think this is a very important question, and this is also one of the highlights of today's summit talk. To my best knowledge, I think this is my first time to see such a concept emerging. Between China and the United States. You know that in the past year, there has been quite many new concepts, new notion, new terminologies or expressions emerging from the two sides. But for this concept, which is called the constructive and strategically stable relation, I think this is the first time which the President Xi proposed to the U.S. side. To my best understanding, I think it contains possibly three dimensions which China wants to convey or delivers to the American side. I think the first dimension was that the two countries should be more of a partner rather than a rival, and the two sides should join hands and make efforts for the peacekeeping among the two countries. This is the first. And the second, possibly the second dimension would be, I think both the two sides admit and acknowledge that there has been certain conflicts or competitions or rivals between the two countries. But the important thing was not the rivals or the competition, but the important thing is that to make sure those competitions would be within a manageable range. So manageable would be the keywords this time. And the third dimension, to my best knowledge, would be that I think the two sides should make clear each other's red line. The bottom line for each side, and try to make sure they have enough policy coordination so that neither side would touch and across those red lines. I think this is my interpretation to this terminology.
So going through this partnership together and not confronting each other as rivals, we're saying. But meanwhile, we are aware that NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang unexpectedly joined President Trump's delegation at the last minute alongside other major American business leaders as well. Professor Zhang, what does this inclusion tell us about how central AI and semiconductor issues have become in bilateral relations?
Yes, I do see some, media reports from the U.S. side. Jensen Huang was pretty in a hurry to take airplanes. And indeed, this afternoon, around 5 or 4 o'clock, I do observed there was, a Chinese premier, Li Qiang's, hosting of a meeting with the U.S. business representatives and the CEOs. And I do saw also a short, interview from the Jensen Huang with one of the Chinese media. And indeed, the Chinese media asked the same question to Jensen Huang: why did you take, the airplane at the last minute? So his answer is very simple, that the President Trump asked him to go. So that is his answer. But I think my understanding or my interpretation from this message would be that from both, the U.S. perspective and the China's perspective, I think the political and the diplomatic struggles or containment, the U.S. containment policy on the China's rise does not necessarily mean the two countries' economic decoupling. So what I try to say is that the two countries do have this, frictions in the diplomatic dimensions, but at the same time, the two countries' economy are deeply interdependent with each other. So both the China side and U.S. side are happy with such, the business leaders' mutual visit, and there are indeed deep potential for the two countries' collaboration in, the supply chain, semiconductors, and AI.
Definitely. Just as our Professor Zhang has mentioned, despite these deep competition between the two countries, both leaders, they repeatedly emphasize economic engagement through today's meetings. So, Professor Kim, what about you? Do you think this summit produced some meaningful momentum for stabilizing U.S.-China economic ties?
I agree with Professor Zhang in the sense that, the summit went without any significant issues today. So in that sense, today's summit probably did create some meaningful momentum for short-term stabilization in U.S.-China economic ties, particularly because both sides seem to be determined or appear to be determined to avoid further escalation and repeatedly emphasize the importance of economic engagement and communication. And so the presence of major U.S. business leaders in Beijing also reinforced this message that neither side wants a complete economic rupture. But at the same time, the moment should not be overstated. The summit seems to have produced more of a political signal of stabilization rather than a fundamental breakthrough on the underlying disputes. And both leaders emphasized cooperation, economic engagement, and the importance of maintaining communication channels. And they indicated that they agree for the need to avoid further disruption, and particularly economic disruption. But the two governments still appear deeply divided over tariffs, export controls, semiconductors, AI, the Taiwan issue, which President Xi Jinping stated is critical to U.S.-China relations, and industrial policy. And in general, there are just deeper structural disputes that remain unresolved. So in this way, the summit is not necessarily a major breakthrough, but a repeated effort on both sides to publicly frame the relationship as competitive, but still governable and cooperate to a certain extent.
But despite these ongoing technology restrictions, President Trump has publicly called on China to open up further to American companies during this latest visit. Professor Kim, how likely is Beijing to make some meaningful concessions in sensitive sectors like AI and technology?
I think for the most part, it's somewhat unlikely that Beijing is going to be making truly far-reaching concessions in sensitive sectors like AI, advanced semiconductors, or core dual-use technologies, even though President Trump publicly urged China to open up further to American companies during the summit. The more realistic expectation is selective tactical communication rather than structural liberalization. Now, the main reason is that advanced technology has moved on from being primarily an economic issue and is now a national security issue for both governments. And that means that the scale of this has just gotten bigger. Now, especially from Beijing's perspective, making major concessions in AI or advanced technology would risk reinforcing long-term dependence on US technology ecosystems, precisely when China is trying to achieve technological self-defense. And Chinese leaders, technological self-reliance. And Chinese leaders have repeatedly framed semiconductors and AI as essential to national rejuvenation and strategic autonomy. And it's also directly tied to military modernization, industrial competitiveness, and long-term geopolitical influence. So this makes it politically meaningful concessions extremely difficult domestically. So China may be somewhat more accommodating toward American firms in areas where foreign participation supports its own economic goals, but in general, it's unlikely to provide a broad opening that Washington wants in sensitive technology sectors. And while the summit may produce some symbolic gestures, limited licensing arrangements, or narrowly defined business openings, the probability of China making major concessions in the strategically sensitive AI and advanced technology sectors remains still relatively low.
That's where domestic interests really have to collide. Now, shifting gears, the two leaders also discussed the Middle East situation during today's summit. According to the White House, the two leaders agreed on keeping the Strait of Hormuz open and preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons. Professor Zhang, how significant is that kind of agreement between the two?
First of all, I want to say that I agree with Professor Kim that there doesn't seem to be enough strong evidence to say that the two leaders have got enough breakthrough through today's meeting. And with that, having said that, I think probably their agreement on Iran might be one of the so-called possible breakthrough agreement today so far. But one important thing is that I've also searched the internet. I also noticed that according to the Western media, or according to the White House from the American side, there has been a confirmation that the President Xi got agreement with President Trump on the opening, of the Hormuz Strait, and also the Iran's denuclearization issue. But however, I want to say that this is only the media release and media reports that I can confirm from the Western or American media. I tried to search from the Chinese media as well this afternoon and this evening, but I saw nothing. So that is to say that there has been no confirmation from the China side that the two leaders have agreed on this. I think this is one thing that we have to know in advance. But however, personally, I think China is also highly concerned on what is going on between Iran and the US. If you see that exactly last week, 1 week ago, the Iran's foreign minister paid a visit to Beijing. And I saw many media reports by saying that the Chinese government also tries to press and urge Iran to begin the talks, negotiations with the United States side. So this is to say that indeed China is also highly concerned on the Iran situation. And also China doesn't want to see the continuous rise on the global energy price. So, probably this will be some of the common grounds which has been shared between Beijing and Washington, D.C. on the Iran situation.
Right, a very important point that you've made. We have yet to hear from the Chinese media yet, so we'll really have to look into the joint statement for the details. But before that, we also hear that Taiwan has emerged once again as one of the most sensitive issues during the summit. President Xi warned that mishandling this issue could even lead to conflict between the two countries. How seriously should we take that kind of message, and what does it tell us about the current state of cross-strait tensions?
Well, I think first of all, the President Xi and the President Trump, they met last year in Gyeongju, on the occasion of APEC in South Korea, and it was clear that Taiwan issue was not really, included as one of the agenda for the summit talk last year. So that's one of the reasons that at least in China, everyone was expecting there could be certain substantial, negotiations or talk over the Taiwan issue this time in Beijing. And, as I noticed from the President Xi's statement this afternoon, it is clear that the President Xi has been giving a pretty strong and harsh warning to the U.S. side, saying that if the Washington, D.C. didn't handle its policy, its relation with Taiwan well, this will possibly lead to a potential conflicts or direct conflicts between China and the United States. So I think this is already a strong and a clear and straightforward message. And also, I think China has a strong expectation on the policy or the position that has been taken by the United States. We know that at the end of last year and also early this year, the President Trump administration has been doing the arms sales to Taiwan. And in the past years, the United States admitted the one China policy and did not support the Taiwan independence. But this time, I think China wants a stronger commitment by the U.S. side by saying that the U.S. so-called oppose the Taiwan independence. But whether the two sides have really reached that agreement, we have no clues yet. We have to wait and see for a couple of days whether there will be certain deeper agreement or not. We have to be more patient to see.
Right, definitely. So we'll have to keep close tabs on the remaining days of Trump's stay in Beijing. Now, finally, despite clear differences remaining between the two sides, both leaders appeared to keep communication channels open through this summit. So, Professor Kim, after these kinds of meetings, do you see relations becoming more stable moving forward?
I think the summit, and this happens quite frequently with many summits, but the summit may contribute to a degree of short-term stabilization in U.S.-China relations, but not long-term resolution, and probably not a fundamental improvement in the relationship itself. Professor Zhang also just mentioned the Taiwan issue, and I think that's kind of one of the examples of this as well. And so what we are seeing is less of a genuine rapprochement and more of an effort by both sides to prevent competition from escalating into uncontrolled confrontation. And the fact that both leaders appeared eager to maintain direct communication, though, is itself significant. Over the past several years, the relationship has repeatedly been destabilized by tariff disputes, technology restrictions, military tensions in the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea, and growing distrust surrounding AI and supply chains. And in that environment, even maintaining regular high-level dialogue has become strategically important because both governments recognize the economic and geopolitical costs of unmanaged escalation. But at the same time, it's undeniable that the broader U.S.-China relationship is increasingly defined by structural rivalry. The United States would like to maintain its status quo as the sole unipolar superpower in the world, whereas China prefers a model emphasizing multipolarity, state sovereignty, and reduced U.S. military dominance in the very least. And so those competing visions of international order create tensions that cannot easily be resolved through a single summit or a limited set of agreements.
Right, so we will hope for this latest summit to pave the way for more of these kinds of developments moving forward. But as for now, we'll have to conclude our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Professor Kim.
Thank you so much.
And of course, Professor Zhang, we really appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.